This day came after being tortured in the skin. A crusader, a legionnaire, and a samurai. We are going to where I dreamed of visiting. Everyone is of course talking about Sparta, the harshest state in history. Today we will grow cubes on the press and we will go under the command of the king Leonid to fight with the Persians and to find out what was the feat of 300 Spartans. In fact, unfortunately, real life is great, different from what the films showed. Our channel. Is it true that you would like to vote? We'll go to Sparta in the comments and get ready, it will be very brutal. Let's start with a historical reference itself. The name of the state of Sparta is not too correct and got used thanks to the Romans. Look at any shield. The Spartan warrior is clearly visible there. Letter L in Greek sounds like CAC, lambda. The reason is simple. The Spartans are not. They called themselves Spartans. They named the Lacedaemonians in honor of the city of Laka, a demon whose stroke is mistaken. Moves to the last syllable. Even experienced historians are later cities. More often they began to be called Sparta. Where did it come from? Modern name of two prejudices, positioning Sparta as closed. There are no cities, no friends. Sparta is a state, which existed for almost 1,000 years, from the 11th to the 1st centuries BC. At that time, there were states on the territory of Greece. Many in our Sparta settled in the south, Peloponnese Peninsula, in the region. The so-called Laconic word for the concept. Laconic speech came precisely from there. After all, the people who inhabited Sparta are talkative. You can't name where ours was born. Spartan, Vasia. Don't be surprised. The name is Vasilis, Greek and actually very proud, because in a direct translation it means the king on yard. Somewhere in 480 BC Sparta, a strong state like never before, spreads influence almost on the whole. The Peloponnese Peninsula side by side, the Athenian state was located. Our state does not like, but the main thing, Athens is not the problem. To the east, the huge Achaemenid Empire see. The common people are known as Persians. Varieties of Greeks are not understood and loaded. One simple goal will capture all. Greek land is a serious problem. After all, one look at the map is enough to understand how much more the Persians have. People's resources and banal unity. If Greece is divided into mini-states, joined the union only in front of the face. Threats. The Persians fought on one front, running ahead. We will note that they lost. Why? Because the art of war is for the Greeks it is sacred, but for the Spartans it is not at all. Is life. Our Basil is a typical Hamel, so in Sparta, we're called full-fledged citizens and simple laborers. Muvaki were before her. Mods are considered citizens only, half, but the most difficult part was waiting, and Lotov is the poorest caste. Spartans are mostly present, peasants, and they hung out somewhere in between, by serfs and slaves, but the arrangement. Sparta was more complicated than similar ones. States, for example, our family, Vasily could have a dozen subordinates, and lots of land plots on paper. They were serfs and obliged, provide the family with blessings, fixed percentage yield difference. Sparta from other states of that time, in that the master could not. To increase this percentage it was set, legislatively. Vasily was lucky to be a citizen of Sparta after all. A citizen had 10 lots of kanyat at once. They often staged an uprising and were punished. They are as hard as possible for 1 hour. Spartan rulers even announced, own and lot of war in order to cut the most violent and keep everyone in obedient. Yes, you were not mistaken. Spartans, in fact, declared war on themselves. After all, it is about one of the most brutal. All states in history were subordinated. Vasily fought for the same purpose as others. 7-year-old boy left his family and went to the barracks. There, the Spartan guys were beaten into groups and taught the military art of sports and even reading. What happened at that time? He was always unusually close to children. Someone is an adult. The children were walking exclusively without shoes and in one and the other. Same clothes in winter and summer are separate. History. All teenagers asked, with a special broth of its name. We had pork cooked in blood, in the mix with. It is practically unreal to eat with vinegar, and the children lived in this state of hunger. The cult was only encouraged by the party. Simplicity, and at the same time, the cult of power, and no one interfered. Teenagers steal punishment for this. Was cruel. However, the uncaught thief was even praised for demonstrated skills. Now let's talk about the myths themselves. Popular in that they are not fit for service. Children were thrown down mountains. This is the story. Came from the philosopher Plutarch, who in this year of our era told that, who seemed suspicious to the council, children were thrown off a cliff, and the package is supposedly no one's parents. Asked and the case was forced. The trouble is that Greek historians loved embellish reality. In fact, everything was easier with practice. Infanticide was not widespread, only in Sparta and in other regions, Greece and Rome, but it extended to, but there are already very sick children who don't care about her. suffered and for moderately not full-fledged. There was a whole class of citizens. They were called hippos, and others. The guys didn't pay too much attention, but still the bottom. Even archaeologists were demolishing mountains. A long time ago, they studied the entire Kuta Gorge. They allegedly dropped the children off and did not find them there. Let's return to the feast without any remains. Children could wear clothes only at the age of 12. Until that time they drove naked and slept in barracks on straw bedding and, cold days, many were put on the litter. She warmed the body by burning nettles, allowing the guys to survive so that at the age of 17, past the challenge of climbing the temple of Artemis. He was high in the mountains and a test consisted of the most severe whipping of the boy. Had to endure a lot of blows with a whip, which stopped only after the first one, of blood. And if the Spartan burst into a cry, the blows continued even after the blood. They increased the intensity like this. The final exam of our Spartan warrior. Vasily was a real warrior and passed the exam. Great, but the exam only gave rights. Will leave the closed barracks and appear. At the age of 17, Vajja only started in public military service of the state to understand. Let's talk about the salary with ease. As we have already mentioned luxury in Sparta, it was even considered good food. Therefore the phrase Spartan diet is not empty sound. In a month, Vasily received a standard poet. This is 3.5 buckets of barley. 2c. Half a kilogram of cheese is a kilogram. Dates and somewhere a few liters of wine. Compare it with the Roman legionnaires or samurai from past videos and it will work. The depressing picture is also the same as Vasily's. Stood out to the other Spartan warriors. Several metal rods weighing 625 grams each, but this is separate. History trying to avoid luxury and inequality. Spartan ruler Lycurgus came up with an interesting solution for the accumulation of silver and gold was introduced. Death penalty and money on the territory. Sparta were these very iron rods. One weighed 625 grams and to buy something worth money was due. To drag whole teams of ideas, any big deal will do, became public impossible. Transfer so much money imperceptibly and if the transaction is publicly possible. Get interested and find out where a person has so much money. Those who came to Sparta are residents of another country. I faced things that I simply could not buy nothing for gold and silver. The Spartans looked at the coins with horror. The Nugar scheme did not kill corruption, robbers, attacks and robberies. What's the point of taking a bribe if it is necessary to build a hole for money storage? The barn attracts attention so that you are, in addition to the meager ration of pollucle, several sticks were possible on them, buy 10 kilos of meat and lean meat, to survive while training in a murderous daily regime. After all, Spartan warrior is worth 10 seconds, and this principle had to be supported. In general, the equipment of the soldiers is not bad. Transferred the film 300 Spartans. Our Vasily is like any other heavily armed. The hoplite wore a round shield helmet shell on. For some reason, the movie decided on breasts and legs. Leave the torso and Spartans open, but, of course it's stupidity. In reality it is not safe. But they were light Spartans. Infantrymen, spear, bow, darts. These guys, they fought for everything because they were 7 years old. Learned how to use any weapon. The structure of the Spartan army was unique and some details on this. Steal the day successfully. Modern armies clear linear formation. In the ranks of strict discipline and incredible physical strength the Spartan army is invincible. Lining up 8 rows deep into the phalanx. Could stretch for 1 kilometer and up to 371 years before our era was considered. Defeat such an education physically. Perhaps the reason is simple. In contrast to the Spartans did not have other armies. They are simple engineering structures. Pearls forward counting on brute force. And in it they surpassed their lover. We will remind the enemy when we return to you. 480 before our era and the war with the unwashed Persians is in full swing. Sparta is ruled by Tsar Leonid, who is everything around is a wonderful warrior. Everyone is familiar with the movie 300 Spartans and we will not repeat the obvious things, but only, let's focus on the differences of the film and, in reality, let's assume that there are 300. Our Vajja will be together with Tsar Leonid, who really fought on. Vasily was in the vanguard with the soldiers, defends against the Persian army it is logical that the firm saw it in the gorge. At the beginning of the video, we showed a map of the village, demonstrating the size of 2 states. Under the company saws on different accounts, there were up to 250,000 Persians and opposed by only 7,000 Greeks. Warriors. It should be noted that the number of Spartans is not, by the way, 300 people are a personal guard of the king and the best warriors. 2. Indeed, they were detained for 2 long days, 20 times superior to their opponent. Would have kept longer if it was not local. A resident of Ephialt decided to earn some money. Ephialtes told the Persians and Gornoputici, which can be used to bypass positions. Grekov is not a Spartan intelligence, slept, and Leonid was the first to know about it. The king, he immediately sent the whole army home and left it, with only 300 guards hoplites. This is not romance, but common sense. Sparta had no worse sin than retreat from the battlefield without clear an order, since Leonidas was the king to wait for orders. No, ego and not to become an outcast whose name covered with shame. Leonid remained alone and ours. Vasily also chose a similar participation. The film forgot only one detail, together with the Spartans voluntarily. Other Greeks, in particular 700, remained residents of Fez and 400 children of Svivyes, and next to the Spartans were Helots Fr, which we talked about earlier. The number of slaves is not specified, but what's going on? They were made like light infantry. It is officially confirmed that the opposite is true. Both of the previous Xerxes performed not 300 somewhere around 1,500 people. But even this does not cancel the fact of the insane a feat, because these crumbs were put around 5,000 Persians, and not simple ones. But in that volume, number of immortals in Urdu Persian, of the army, a total of 4 were killed in 3 days. Thousands of Greeks about the loss of the Persians more. 5 times exceeded this number in many ways, due to the psychological factor in the future, the Greeks will win the war and conclude very beneficial peace. Do not be sad about. To our Basil, how could you know life? He didn't have the easiest one. To die in battle meant for a Spartan the highest honor. For example, 1 out of 300 Spartans. Aristodem was ill at the time of the battle. Leonid sent his ego to the village for treatment. After the king and the guard were killed, Aristodem returned to Sparta. There him, nicknamed the Aristodem Truss, and even the subsequent feats of the guy are not at all influenced the ego's position in society. In an hour at 479 BC, second Spartan, Pausanias led the Greek army too. She fought the final battle with the Persians, under the town of Payment, and was marked by a total defeat. Persians, and this despite the fact that they were there 3 times more Aristodem member. The original detachment of 300 Spartans became the hero is defeated, but even that is not a drop. Changed his attitude towards him. We will mark the end with another funny one. It is a fact that boys are Spartans since childhood. The girls were double-crossed. Birth of children. Their life was much simpler. The girls were taught sports riding and carefully monitored their health in a sense. Sparta can be considered the progenitor of feminism because even with Spartan weapons, managed to get the job done for a second. It was a couple of thousand years ago, and only 100 years ago in some. The women did not even know how to vote. This clearly demonstrates progress. The thing is relative, but somehow harsh. There was no life of the Spartans a place in history. They impaled themselves constantly, and on this, we have everything. And if reincarnation in you didn't like the Spartan, forget to like, and at the same time, offers his warriors for the future. Releases in the comments for new meetings. Friends.